I'm Roberta Glass, and you're listening to my True Crime Report. So we had some trouble with the YouTube Live. It just kept disconnecting me. So we moved here to Spreaker today to talk about Prince Andrew's, what's being called a nuclear-level explosion bad interview with the BBC. And to talk to me about this is someone very knowledgeable about the royal family, and someone, although I have no recollection, is said to be my mother. Welcome, Mom.
Hi, darling.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to talk to me about this. And I joke that I say I have no recollection of you being my mother, but we heard a lot of that in this interview. I can't recall. I have no recollection. Did you watch the interview, and what did you think?
I was dumbfounded by it. The first thing, I watched it several times, and what came across to me is that Prince Andrew, like so many awful people, have no understanding of just how awful they are. He was arrogant, he was snobbish, he was cold, and foolish. That was my opinion of and an enormous liar.
It reminds me of something, Dad used to say to comfort us. He'd say, that awful person, their punishment is that they have to be them all the time. Imagine that. And we'd always say back to him, but they don't know that they're awful. They think they're great. We're being punished, right?
That's right. That's all I could think of. It was a disastrous interview. I mean, I've never in my life, and I've watched a lot of royal nonsense, I've never seen such a terrible interview. And so he was obviously coached a lot when he came up with these very feeble excuses.
Yeah, we'll talk about those feeble excuses, but have you ever, you know everything about the royal family, going way back. Can this be compared to any other royal scandal or royal interview that you remember or know about?
Well, the only scandal I was sort of thinking about this was Edward VII, and that would be his reign ended in 1911. He was only king for 9 years, but before he became king, because he was Prince of Wales for a long time, he was a philanderer, and some husbands got rather irritated with him and tried to drag him into court. And I think he was also accused of cheating at some kind of game. But I can't remember any other scandal of the magnitude. Perhaps Edward VIII's abdication, but that's an entirely different thing.
Oh, and everything you mentioned, I'm so familiar with, Mom. Meaning, I have never heard of those things before in my life. But
well, you've heard of the abdication of Edward VIII. Everybody heard about that in 1936.
Oh, of course. Right. That's when he married that Nazi,
Wallace
right?
Simpson.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, he was a very mediocre character. Anyway.
Okay.
To get back to the
this is not on the level. These are criminal. This could be a potentially. He's wanted for questioning in America. He's said to have not been traveling to America to avoid this questioning over his participation in the Epstein scandal. So, I'm just going to start with a few of his answers. One, he has no recollection of meeting Virginia Roberts Giuffre, this lady, and how? Is that hard to believe? Was that hard to believe? He's photographed with her.
There's a picture of them together, taken by Jeffrey Epstein with Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. But he can't explain this. Could it be doctored? Well, he doesn't know. It's obviously a picture of him with this woman.
Right, and he said no one can prove that this photograph has been doctored. Well, if you're going to bring it up, you better be prepared to be able to prove that, because the FBI has accepted it as a real picture. No one else is claiming that it's doctored. You're the only one. It's up to you to prove it. I mean, that's how I felt watching it. And did you feel at all that the way that he talked, the distancing language, was similar to Bill Clinton? I had no sexual relations.
Sex with that woman.
Yeah.
With that woman. Yes. Yes. He just looked guilty from the moment he opened his mouth. I mean, just guilty liar.
Right, like almost like a weasel. I wrote like a weasel. It looked weaselly to me.
And he was obviously coached a lot, but the one moment that I was quite fascinated with the interview said, Jon Brockman saw you getting a foot massage from a Russian woman, and he looked startled. It's sort of the one genuine moment. And he said, I don't know that man. But of course, everybody in England would recognize Prince Andrew. So what does it matter that he doesn't know Mr. Brockman?
Who is Mr. Brockman, just for the audience?
He's a literary agent, the interviewer said.
So it took him off guard. He wasn't expecting that question. Right. And it doesn't matter if you saw him or you know him. He's saying he saw. It's whether you had that foot massage. So he skirted the question, really. But really the most bizarre of many bizarre answers was that he could not have been with Virginia Roberts in a nightclub because that afternoon, late afternoon, he had taken his daughter to Pizza Express in Woking for a pizza party. Comments?
Extraordinary. Yes. And he said this was memorable. It happened in March 10th, 2001. It was memorable because people like me or people like would be just extraordinary that people, I've been to Woking once or twice. And so that's how I remember it, because Woking is such a low-class place that I never go there. I mean, really.
Well, I think we found the one winner of this interview, which was the Pizza Express company. Got a lot of free advertisement from this interview.
Yes.
And then he said that Virginia Roberts described him as sweaty and smelling bad. He didn't address the smelling bad, but he did say that he was shot at in the Falkland War and can't sweat. He has a rather unusual medical condition that he couldn't be sweaty. And then Twitter produced about 100 pictures of him. Yeah, too much adrenaline. Produced 100 pictures of him sweaty. And and doctors have now come out and said that his medical explanation makes no sense. So you say he was coached. Did his team come up with that? Did he come up with that? And who in the right mind would think that was a good answer?
I have no idea. As I've mentioned to you before, he's not very bright, but they hired a PR person in September to try and rehabilitate him, and I'm sure the PR person advised him not to do this interview and quit 2 weeks ago. So he's very arrogant, and the Queen signed off on this interview, and apparently I've read that he wants to do another interview. How stupid is that?
Are you kidding? Where did you read that? Do you remember?
I just read it, I think it was in Vanity Fair. He's urging to do another one. I mean, that this would be disastrous. And I've also read that Prince Charles wants to eliminate him from being a working royal because it's so damaging to them. They'll put on a public face, they'll circle the wagons, but I don't know what they're going to do with him. They've really got to rusticate him off to one of their estates.
That's a good point. So what does that mean when you're retired as a working royal? Like, what happens to his charity? What happens
Well,
then?
well, I don't really know. I don't think it's ever happened before, but the charities that he is a patron of are reconsidering using him, and he has something called Pitch at the Palace, where people can come up with new ideas, entrepreneurs. He's very interested in business.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 companies have pulled out of their sponsorship of it, the money. It's like $100,000, one accounting firm, and I just read another one has also pulled out. So he's really radioactive at this point.
He certainly is, and that brings me to another point about when he was asked whether he regretted his friendship. He said he didn't regret it because he learned so much about. I mean, that was the perfect time for the follow-up question. For what did you learn from Jeffrey Epstein? Because no one's really sure how he made his money. He has this one client, Wexler, and that's about it. I mean, what did he learn?
He's a mystery man, the Gatsby of America. Nobody knows. He's such a peculiar character. I have no idea what he would learn. Business acumen, I have no idea what. I mean, because you must remember that Prince Andrew says he saw nothing in his behavior or in the people in the houses he stayed in, that there were young women there. He saw nothing. That's what he said in the interview.
And there was another part where he said he's used to all the servants in Buckingham Palace, so he treated all the guests in Jeffrey Epstein's house like servants and didn't ask them any questions, personal questions.
I mean, he said good morning to them.
Oh, good morning. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
So the next thing he also said, all these things were things that he thought would reflect well on him. Don't you think that he was taking his kid, that he was also, so the problem with Pizza Express and Woking is that it doesn't give this is a nightclub, tramp nightclub, and a pizza party would have happened late afternoon. So if you say he's not a suspect in a murder, but if he were, and he said he was home alone, that's probably with his kids, that's not a great alibi. Would you agree?
Oh, it's a terrible alibi, because you go to Pizza Express at 5, you go to nightclubs at 10 at midnight,
And this nightclub's open till 5 in the morning, by the way.
Hmm.
And he was a regular at it, but he says he doesn't know where the bar was.
Because he doesn't drink, is what he also mentioned. But he doesn't matter. He could have somebody could have brought her a drink, or that doesn't make much sense. I'm sure he knows where the bar is.
I'm sure he does too. Or someone said on Twitter that was the one part of the interview he believed, because they're such leeches, the royal family. He said that he's never seen Epstein with a camera, so that the photograph couldn't be taken. He never wears.
It was Virginia's camera, or a little Polaroid that she carried around.
Right. And he said also he always wears a suit and tie. But let's look at that picture of Prince Andrew and Epstein walking in Central Park. Is he in a suit and tie there?
No, he's in a jacket, like a windbreaker kind of type jacket.
Right, no tie. I mean, there's a million pictures of him dressed exactly like how he was dressed in the picture with Virginia Roberts. I mean, these are so poor. I mean, so poor,
well,
but
he's in a dress shirt with Virginia Roberts and slacks. He probably took off his jacket.
Good point.
I don't know. It's not a like a tennis shirt or something. No, it's a dress shirt.
Let's go to his point. Anyway. Epstein was only a +1.
That is really pathetic. I mean, if the person is a +1, you never see them again. You don't, they come with the person you've invited, and you never see them. You don't even learn their names.
Mm-hmm.
This is ridiculous alibi.
And
we stayed in his homes all over the place.
And can we go back to the photograph where he said that photograph is taken upstairs, and I've never been upstairs.
I know. That is so revealing.
So revealing, right? And all this. So, I mean, I thought he was coached where he was sort of shaking his head and keeping his chin down to look sympathetic. What ways could you tell he was coached?
Well, because he would sort of, you could sort of see him. Oh, answer number 6. There we go. And he would spout off some nonsense and then stop. The only time I saw him really genuine is with someone seeing him getting a foot massage. Then he looked really startled. He wasn't coached on that answer.
You would think, though, that he showed no sympathy for the victims. He talked about his work identifying pedophiles and abused children, and that he never saw any of that. He couldn't identify it in Epstein's houses.
That people behave differently around me, he said. So they would, implying that Epstein would clean up his act when he arrived. I don't think so.
Well, it's just very hard to believe. And do you think that if Virginia Roberts didn't have the picture, if we didn't have the videotape, if she just had the flight logs, which, by the way, support her story, do you think she would have been believed?
No. The picture is the most damning piece of evidence. Generally, they can say she's a liar, she's unstable, she's ill, she's full of pills, she's this or that, and she is in a mental institution. They say anything like that, but the picture tells the story.
And, and he often refers to his team as looking to try to prove the picture, is fake. Really, I think what's so startling about this interview is how little he has. And so what he goes to is this kind of, what I call kind of persona management. Like, I'm such a great guy. At one time he says, I'm too honorable a person. That's why I kept this friendship and I went and broke up with him in person, which I'll go to in a second. But what he's really saying is, I'm too great a guy to ever get involved in a child sex trafficking ring. And I may have inadvertently found myself in the middle of it for years and years and years and just been too naive to know what was going on. But I'm a war hero. I'm a family man. I'm a royal. He really relied on all his, surfacey image stuff, right?
Right.
I just never knew I could do any of that, Mom. If I could say, I'm sorry, I didn't clean my room. My mind was too filled with such honorable stuff. It was just cluttered with ways to save the world. I just couldn't do it. This would have been a good strategy, don't you think?
Well, he often would say that's a stretch. Well, it's a stretch to say he's honorable. I mean, really, where he came up with that one. I mean, he could have sent him an email or something, or a phone call.
Well, when you don't want to be near someone, you tend not to fly over to tell them in person you're breaking up. I mean, I had images of the end of Casablanca in my head. The problems of two pedophiles don't amount to a hill of beans, Jeffrey, in this crazy world. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get on that plane and we'll never see each other again, I mean, he had to break up with him in person. That was his reason. It's laughable. I mean, it's just so laughable. It's amazing that anyone told him this was a good idea, that he was coached through these answers, and anyone Maybe these people need to be in a mental institution. Anyone said this is a great idea. Go ahead. And the fact that he wants to do it again really gives you an idea of someone who thinks he can talk his way out of it. He thinks he's charming.
I know. He's very spoiled and not too bright.
He broke up in person, but he was the guest of honor at his get out of jail party, but he doesn't remember. It was a very small party, and it wasn't about Jeffrey Epstein getting out of jail.
No. Yeah, it's really something, that guy. The amount of lying and obfuscation is just staggering. Let's just change this picture here. I'm wonderful, and I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't remember anything. There you go.
I mean, and he said that if his lawyers advised him to go under oath and answer questions, he would. But no lawyer in their right mind, looking at the evidence, would tell him to do that.
No.
So, my question, I guess, to you is, I mean, it's great. I mean, we can just laugh. I mean, it's really
laughable.
Really laughable, and that he has no idea. I mean, to know that you're being laughed at and to want to do it again is really a kind of confidence that I envy, but not a kind of out of touchness that I envy. But
no.
So, my question is, if he had put in sympathy for the victims, if he had talked sympathetically about the victims and answered everything else the same, Pizza Express, the doctored pictures, would that have made a difference?
Maybe a slight difference, but he has no empathy. It's all about, it's all about him and, his image. He has no feeling. I mean, the very bizarre thing when he said that a man to make love is a positive action, and you remember positive actions. Well, what about the woman in this situation? These things aren't relationships. Mm-hmm. They're just some kind of gratification. It's not. It's just something else.
And Virginia Roberts says she'll never get over it. There's pieces of her missing that will never be put back together again. And
no, we're so damaged by these things, and this man has no sense of it. No sense. Even if say he didn't do it, he has no sense, no imagination that he can imagine a woman feeling this way, or anybody who's been sexually assaulted and used.
Right. A child. She was a child. 17, you can argue. I know there's been arguments about, that's the legal age of consent in some states. She wasn't really a child. But everybody knows how young 17 is, really, when you get to be an adult. And that's a child. You're a child. You're a child at that age. And his sense that everybody's just for his using, and he got something out of it, so it was worth it for him, no matter who he hurts. Does this change your view of the royal family? Or just him?
Yes, it does. It does. It's so damaging. What one is attracted to is, the glamour of it, but this is sordid and not anything you want to admire. They're trying to, they go around consoling people and laying wreaths and taking on charities and visiting the sick and infirm and the aged, but this is just sordid.
Mm-hmm. And, where do you think this? You said to me once that these royal people have nothing to do.
No, they don't. They perform, and in performing, you close off your inner self, the thing that really propels you, and so they're not connected with that inner life that most of us have. The rest of us who aren't royal or aren't on the world stage. I mean, the Queen can't really cry or feel. You've shut that down, and I wouldn't want to be them for anything in the world.
You told me something interesting about the Queen, that she's always lined up her pens, almost like a little OCD-ish.
She did. Well, as a child, she would line up her shoes before she went to bed. Everything was in order.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that she made do you think she was taught that kind of, to cut her emotions off, or do you think, is that part of the royal training, or is it just from having no love from the mother to the, to
well,
being
I think
unloved?
her parents did love her, but her grandmother, she was taught right from the beginning to be a royal person, to be disciplined. And that discipline that's acquired so early is kind of damaging,
Mm-hmm.
You almost never, maybe she did cry a little bit at Princess Margaret's funeral, but you almost never see her show any emotions. After she'd go on a world tour, 6 months tour, you'd see her shaking hands with Charles and Anne, not hugging them. Mm-hmm. This was protocol,
And she got in a lot of trouble when Diana died, of not going back to the palace, of not interrupting her vacation.
Yes, but mothers, Diana criticized her son, and mothers don't like that. They, I don't think she had any understanding of Diana's emotional needs, which were great.
Well, just as a public figure, don't you think she would I'm making a parallel between her being out of touch with the public and what the public needed of her at that time, and Prince Andrew being out of touch. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are people with... Yeah. Do you agree with that, or...?
I think they're completely out of touch because they live in such a 19th century way, with footmen and equerries and secretaries and huge estates all over the place. Most of us don't live that way, and it separates you from real life.
But what is their team doing is what I know you don't have an answer, but I just wonder when he says my team, that's what the team's job. I guess we do know the one guy left, but you wonder with a team like that they would know better, but...
Well, they seem pretty out of touch as well.
Yeah, I'm like, what is the team drinking? Is they just so unpleasant to deal with it? Do you think that this was kind of a ruse in his team? Like, great idea, Prince Andrew, love the sweating answer, go for it, and just sat back and watched him destroy himself? I mean...
Well, they do get paid, but boy, they must be as out of touch as the royals.
I have a very serious question. I know the Queen's corgis are no more, but had they adopted a corgi...
She has 4.
Oh, 4 still left?
She doesn't have 11. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had they interviewed a corgi in the BBC in place of Prince Andrew, would that have done more for him?
Yes, they're very charming, and they're full of beans.
You can say that as a corgi owner yourself.
And they're very direct in their emotions.
They're very direct. True. Can you remember? We're just wrapping up. I mean, I just wrote a lot of these, ridiculous. I think it's very hard to talk about this interview seriously, isn't it? I mean, just very hard.
Oh, it was shocking. I just sat there with my mouth open, Oh, my goodness.
I mean, it was just... and you thought... I was disappointed with Emily Mattilas, is that how you pronounce her name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
With her lack of follow-up, but you think that was a good approach. Why?
Well, because if she had really nailed him, followed up, she would be badgering. The British have a great respect for the royal family. So I thought she was very insistent. I mean, his answers were so ludicrous that she almost didn't need to follow up. I mean, they were like turds falling in the air, one after another. I mean, it was just...
Mom's review of the interview, it was like many turds falling in the air. Maybe that's what his smell is. The turds coming from his mouth. Maybe that's...
It was so obvious he was lying. Everybody saw it. So she didn't need to do that.
You maybe write him a postcard or a note. Dear Prince Andrew, your interview with the BBC reminded me of many turds. So have you ever seen any one interview? The only interview I could remember that was this bad for someone's public image was Whitney Houston's Crack is Whack interview. And funny,
Yeah.
But this was not a criminal matter,
No.
As illegal as drugs are, it wasn't, she wasn't up on criminal charges over it. Can you remember any one interview that was so devastating for a public figure?
No, you could see Bill Clinton was lying when he said, I did not have sex with that woman. That was very clear. I knew instantly he was lying, and I think everybody else did too. There was Gary Hart, but these are different. These are different things. They're sexual matters, and that's a sexual matter, but it's not criminal. It's just foolish,
Right. We hadn't seen the dress yet. He didn't have,
Right.
It wasn't a sit-down interview. It was a brief statement.
No, none of them would ever do that.
You mentioned Nixon's, before we started recording, you mentioned Nixon's Checkers speech. And
that worked, It was very maudlin, and it worked. Eisenhower kept him as vice president in the second term.
See, he knew where to go with a dog. Maybe the thing is to do is
the checkers, dog.
It's just
a corgi.
It's just like the advice in the movie I'm thinking of, the Kazan movie. Where he tells the politician to get a dog.
Oh, facing the crowd?
Facing the crowd. Yes, facing the crowd. He tells him to get a dog for sympathy. The uptight, very rich, out of touch politician. He tells him to get it. He's like, I have a cat. Oh, that won't work. You have to get a dog. Maybe the only hope for Prince Andrew is to get a dog. Just like Bill Clinton did, and take a lot of pictures with the dog looking forlorn, like the only person in the world that will accept him as a dog. I say that's probably the closest thing. But sometime, what really this does is it puts a lot of pressure on Prince Andrew to answer questions, either under oath or not, to the FBI or answer questions in a deposition. And if he did that, if he had done that, is there any way he could have handled this that would have preserved his public image? Had he told the truth from the beginning?
Well, he can't tell the truth. He can't in this position. He should never have given this interview, and there is no way, unless he was going to unless he was going to tell the truth, and he hasn't, and his statements aren't truthful, and the interview wasn't truthful.
Yeah, I just to me, it's a profound example of how there's the only way out is the truth in this situation. When you're really caught like this, the only way out is the truth. In some ways, I think he would be protected. They're not going to put Prince Andrew in jail.
No.
I think
send him off to one of the palaces.
Yeah, which one would you suggest? Do you have a perfect place for him?
Well, they're all quite large. I don't know. Maybe Balmoral would be nice up in Scotland.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to see him or smell him. And one last question. They didn't mention the loan that he was given by Epstein for his ex-wife.
He arranged for his former wife,
Sarah Ferguson.
Right. And that was never mentioned.
Why do you think this was a no-holds-barred
I don't know.
interview?
I don't know why she didn't bring that up.
Okay.
Because you plus one is just loaning him money, a stranger. Hmm.
Right. I mean, that was just obviously, and Maxwell settled her lawsuit with Virginia Roberts out of court.
He
So
did. Yeah.
that, I mean, unless you're some kind of crazy Michael Jackson supporter where you think these rich people just can't be bothered with going through with these lawsuits and just pay out people millions, that really is, in some ways, an admission of guilt. It can be seen as an admission of guilt, don't you think?
Yes, I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
Well, and Prince Andrew, get a corgi, and maybe a horse would help too.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bob.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Bye, Roberta.
Thanks.